welcome to another episode of the Rescue Swimmer Mindset Podcast. I am your host, Vince, and joined with my co-host, Cody. Welcome.
What's up, Vince?
What is up? This is going to be a good episode. We are talking underwaters, everyone's favorite, the science, the technique, the physical, and the mental. It's going to be a good episode.
You really got into the nitty-gritty stuff that we didn't cover.
Gritty, picky. Yes, exactly. It's great, actually, to see the connection with our courses. We talk about it a lot, but there's a little extra detail there that Dr. Phillips has definitely developed and with his knowledge. So we're going to get into it.
Cool. And before we do, now that I'm back in the Coast Guard, I'm just going to read a few sentences for everyone listening. The views expressed herein are those of the podcaster, so RSM, and are not to be construed as official and are not reflective of the views of the Commandant or the Coast Guard. Boom.
Boom. So, love it.
Let's do some.
I do want to talk about the Perfect Form program that's coming out. A lot of people have wanted to improve their technique or their swimming or their swimming times. Well, you know how you're going to do that? You're going to do that by getting better with your strokes, getting better with your technique, and becoming just, rather than just giving her the beans, which we seem to be really good at giving her the beans, but not always taking the time that it takes to perfect your form and your technique, which will allow you to appear like you're giving it the beans, even though you're truly milking it because you're crushing the technique.
Exactly. We covered a lot in that course, so I think we should just kind of read through the main talking points. So here's what we covered. We started off with talking about why form matters. That one, we're going to talk about that in this podcast a lot, actually. So it's really pertinent it just matters a lot. And I know we had a podcast in the past where we talked about how I was like, it doesn't matter that much. It does, actually. You won the debate. All right. The next one is going to be freestorm form breakdown. So Vince did a huge freestyle form breakdown. Is that the biggest chunk of the entire course? I think.
Yeah, that whole chapter is about 50 minutes. So that's like the longest video section is the freestyle form breakdown. Because if you're an elite military operator or fire department, search and rescue, usually you're doing the freestyle stroke is the principal stroke. So we really wanted to make sure that was a big part of the perfect form.
Boom. Finning techniques and workouts. So that's with and without gear. So we talked about everything like that. It's pretty obvious why finning is important, especially with those giant fins. We talked about ocean versus pool swim form, which was a smaller section, but there are some minute differences. So Vince covered that in depth.
That's fun because you get to see the difference between a military operator and just a recreational swimmer in a pool and how you implement that in your day-to-day. And we talk a little bit about situational awareness, about the hazards, and how you actually adjust your swimming stroke to better do that.
Right on. Another good one that we talked about was buddy towing. We also covered egg beater, which we also cover in this podcast. It's a big sticking point for a lot of people, especially me. So it's nice to hear from a true professional. Professional.
He's a professional.
Yeah. Yep. So those are the big points. We also covered some underwater science, which Vince is the go-to on that, and underwater form, which is basically the entire talking point of this podcast.
Yeah. Overall, what's cool with this course is it's taught by two professionals now, Cody and myself. It's also including Q&As with the individuals and your peers and similar people that are passionate about bettering themselves in the underwater or the surface swimming world. So you get to see the questions and answers that we get from that. And it's just a good amount of content. You get about a little over 3 hours of instructions as well as a manual. So check it out. That's the Perfect Form Masterclass. Yeah.
So we'll put the URL on our Instagram, link in the bio thing that we just talk about. We'll put the link in the show notes here. So it's rescueswimmermindset.com/perfect form. All right, let's get into the podcast. Our water confidence expert, Dr. Alan Phillips. Doctor, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here and finally not have to deal with the technical difficulties we had last time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Last time we had Dr. Phillips on, we were trying to get it set up, but he was deployed. So there was about like a 5-second delay on Zoom. And I immediately was like, I'm not editing this. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to even start. This is canceled. Next podcast. But yeah, so it's good to have you on now. Let's get right into it. Let's get into underwaters, a little bit of your background there. How did you get started with underwaters? What attracted you to it?
So I was a pararescue candidate, a failed one at that, but it's obviously a big part of the training for it. And kind of the short story of it is, I just, even after the end of the road came for me, I still just kind of kept training, in part because I enjoyed it, in part because I was stationed in San Antonio, Texas at the time, so which is where all the initial pararescue training and selection takes place. So there was a lot of other students around there. And then being somewhat proficient at it, I'd go to the pool and people would ask questions, and go over to Lackland Air Force Base to just open lap swim hours. And I used to call it kind of like pick up water confidence. Yeah, so just kind of kept training there for a while. And then basically when the end of the road officially came for me, I still kept training for myself also, because I just was going through some tough times personally and professionally. And it was an activity and a pursuit that at least for the 1 or 2 or 3 hours a day that I was practicing, it was something that could still be very successful at and feel good about myself. So then eventually when I left active duty and went into the reserves, you moved away from Texas. That's about when the GoPro came. And then I just started just randomly. I just kind of want to see what I look like under there to start. And then I just said, hey, this looks kind of cool, and put some videos up and got some good response. And then just kept putting more stuff up, and people kept reaching out. And one of the reasons also I kept at it too was because even when I was done and there was no chance I was going to get another chance, I still felt like I had a lot of information to share. And if I had just said, okay, I'm done, I'm quitting, no more water confidence ever again, I felt like it would be a shame that all of this information, wisdom that I accumulated would just kind of vanish into space and never be used by anyone again. And so at least it felt like I had some purpose in what I had gone through and what I had learned, and now just being able to share and pass it on to other people. And that's that's kind of what keeps me going. And also just as I was starting to come through, there were a lot of people who invested a lot in me of their own time. And so just kind of, like we all do, we try to pay it forward and respect the people who helped us get to where we are, and just try to pass it on to the next generation.
What did you feel like underwater's brought to you when you were saying you were going through those either career or personal hardships?
A part of it was just just feeling good about myself, having accomplished something that is pretty challenging and not a lot of people are very successful at. There's also just the meditative aspect of you're under there and it's extremely quiet, and really the only way to be successful at it is to be fully invested and fully absorbed in the activity, and pretty much everything that's happening outside the pool kind of fades away for that time that you're under there. So it really did those two big things for me. Just number one, just the confidence. Number two, it was really like a meditative practice.
Yeah. I always say like the underwater world is kind of a different realm where all those sounds get muffled and it kind of becomes your happy place, especially when you consider in rescue swimmer school. I think most successful graduates, they always see the underwaters as kind of a time to reconnect. I mean, it's dreaded as well because it's so challenging, but it's also a time to reconnect with yourself and be in your quiet spot when everyone else was yelling like prior couple seconds. One question I did want to ask was, you said you were pretty successful in the underwater world. What's one of your proudest achievements? Yeah,
so I mean, individually, I mean, there's some workouts that I feel good about doing, and I guess I remember one particular workout doing 10 underwaters, so 10 with the way the Air Force does it, so 25 meters underwater, 25 surface swim back. And I was just having a great day, and did 10 on the 110, and which other people have done, but just the way I could have, how easy it felt, that was a really good day. But really the thing that makes me the proudest is seeing people that I've worked with over time, finally getting their berets or getting through selection. Because I know in the big picture of underwater performance, what I do is I don't swim 250 meters underwater. I don't do some of the free diving stuff that you're able to accomplish, Vince. So I try to focus on really what I'm able to pass on to other people. And just the fact that I'm, still able to do this as someone who was, pretty much failed out of the community. Essentially, I was, never went to dive, never went to AST school, never went to, any of those things. And so the fact that, the fact that I get to talk to guys like you, and the fact that, people come from around the country to work with me and thinking I have something to share with them, I think that makes me pretty proud, and it's very rewarding.
It's such a unique niche brand that you got going on right now, like the underwater expert. And it is a huge challenge. And so you were talking about basically what we call sprint down, underwater back. So you sprint at the surface and then you come back underwater. And yeah, that's one of the things we talked about in the breath holding course is, to me and a lot of candidates, that's one of the most challenging things you'll have to do in rescue swimmer school. And yeah, we would have to do, I think occasionally, I think we did it a couple times on the minute, right, Cody? Is that what we'd have?
I don't remember specifically. I think, Dr. Phillips, are you talking about for the 25 meters, or you do the underwater 25 and then you come up and do like push-ups, or no? Is that different?
No, so that's 10 ups.
10 ups, okay.
So those, so that exercise is where usually you're across the deep end of the pool. So usually in most pools, the 6 to 8 lane pool, it'll be like 17 to 20. Well, you do one push-up, dive in, swim across, get out, front leaning rest, 2 push-ups, and so forth. And then eventually they build up to, full OCPs, full uniform with the BC vest.
So yeah, I've never done that drill at all, but I thought it sounds incredibly challenging. We don't do that in swimmer school, but I feel like we should, or at least start doing it, because at least not in uniform, maybe in wetsuits, but still it's a great exercise.
A lot of the B-roll footage I did use though for our recent class, that perfect form, we were doing at one point in swimmer school a drill where we were doing the chin ups out of the pool, so into an underwater, which was really challenging because you had to control your breath while doing those pull outs out of the pool, and it was like a high ledge. It wasn't like a low ledge. It was like above your head, and you had to really kick while trying to get your breath back. It's pretty challenging.
Yeah, there's no place to rest.
No,
like your rest is front leaning rest, which isn't really rest.
Yeah, pretty brutal.
And it's so true though. Like I think that's as you get older type of thing. You start to get a little bored with your own achievements of whatever feat or athletic endeavor you're pursuing. And then you truly do get the joy from seeing others people's success. And you're like, oh, this is where I get my second strive and my, excitement again. Because after a while, I feel like you're like, all right, I mean, of course I can always be better and I can always improve, but I'm a little bored with that too,
And you can always, you can have there's only one person, you can only do your own thing, but when you're helping other people succeed, there's really an infinite amount that you can influence.
Yeah, totally true. Yeah.
What's like your step-by-step process when you have a new candidate and you're training them in the underwater? I'm sure it's individual as well, but what do you kind of start and how do you build them up?
Yeah, well, of course, as you mentioned, it's individual depending on where they are, whether they're a beginner, whether there's someone who is pretty far along but just needs to be refined. But pretty much for everyone, we'll start with like the very beginning, working on just their push off and their glide and their streamline. And usually the first thing we'll do is this, okay, I just want you to, usually I'll just say, hey, go ahead, do an underwater, just see where we're at. But after that point, almost everyone, there's something we can improve with their glide. So I'll just say, okay, push off, glide, go as far as you can go until you stop, and then come back to the wall. We'll talk about it. And sometimes we need to spend 5, 6, 8 reps tweaking things. Sometimes it's something really small and they nail it the first time. Then after that, we'll do a glide and then one pull out, and then we'll do pull out and then another glide, and then basically just building up until we get to a full 25 yard or 25 meter underwater. And then at that point we'll start either then we'll start getting into adding the time piece into it and say, okay, how does this hold up under a bit of stress? Usually we won't go into too much intensity when people work with me, just because we're mainly focusing on technique, but it's still important to push those limits a little bit, because what works when you're feeling great sometimes breaks down when it's a little more challenging. So that's where we can see where some of the weaknesses still are, and maybe we need to step back and refine something a bit more. Or yes, probably the most common thing you see is someone glides really great for that first length of the pool and for the first rep or two, but then after we get to reps 5 and 6, then they start just fast stroking it for the second half, and then we just need to remind them, hey, go back to your glide. But usually we'll start from that very beginning, whether it's someone going for Air Force Special Warfare, whether it's a rescue swimmer candidate, whether it's someone going for buds, literally go back to that first glide and push off and getting that body position nailed down perfectly.
Let's break it down. What can you describe the body position?
So it's really no different than like regular swimming. You basically want your body in a perfectly straight line. In your regular swimming, you're pinching your biceps to your ears, hands overlap. That's one of the big things that I do find people you're missing a bit, is they end up with their hands apart in some ways. Sometimes as wide as being like Superman, but usually most people don't know to overlap the hands on top of each other. Then of course, keeping the core tight when you're doing that initial push off, legs close together, toes pointed. And that's for the initial push off. As we get further into the length, we can talk about, how much you need to focus on kind of keeping things really tight versus being relaxed and maybe allowing things to get, out of line, for lack of a better term. But in terms of the push off, making sure everything is super straight, looking straight down, educating people on, it's going to be different for everyone. But let's say let's say it's a 8-foot pool, finding your perfect angle for how quickly you want to get toward the bottom of the pool, because, as we know, it's going to be a lot easier swimming close to the bottom. So some people, it's not, just go straight down, because that would be a waste, but also you don't shoot out at like a 20-degree angle. So you're trying to get to the bottom at, say, the 4th lane out. It's somewhere in between, and it's going to be different for everyone. So just making people aware that, hey, you're going to have to play with the feeling of how you're going to angle yourself off the wall. The other thing too, that's what I was alluding to before, that will be different compared to just regular swimming. So in the Air Force, they have these big, giant, high volume, Atlantis masks, dive masks. So for those, you actually don't want your biceps, you don't want your biceps over your ear. You actually want them to be more kind of off to the side of the mask to keep it secure, because if you push off fast, whether it's doing underwaters or whether it's doing a surface swim, the mask is very likely going to come off, or at least a seal break, and you'll flood your mask. You'll flood your mask unintentionally. I don't have as much experience with some of the smaller volume masks. I don't know how true that is in terms of repositioning the biceps, but that's definitely something with the high volume masks that we want to work with. And then probably the other main point with the breakout, with the push off, is keeping your eyes at the bottom of the pool, because it's incredible how much drag it creates, even just lifting your head ever so slightly. Now with the high volume mask, your head's going to be up a little bit, just because of the nature of having to have your hands more forward, or your biceps more forward, to secure it in place. But in general, you want your head as straight down as possible, because, and especially in a sterile environment where there's no harassment, I promise you, the instructors are not going to move the wall further out. It's going to be six lanes or 8 or whatever it is. It's not going to change. So there's really no need to look at the wall, other than just being not confident in yourself. So we talked a lot about just that push off, and we're one stroke into it. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, I love hearing all the minutia of everything you were saying, like just the angle of your dive. Because, the buoyancy is something you're trying to fight and you're trying to get rid of as soon as possible. So it is important to get to the bottom. But if you're just banking it straight down and then hitting another 90 degrees to continue underwater, well, that's not efficient. But if you're prolonging that that depth, now you're fighting the buoyancy and you're kicking harder off the start for longer. So it's really fun. And those are the things that with more experience you get to really break down. And it seems like you're educating people on. And that's interesting as far as like the hand stacking that we're talking about. That's one thing we talk about in both our courses now, I guess, perfect form and the hold your breath. I would describe that I was personally one of the few that I would always have my hands stacked in front. And then I was also doing, when I had fins, I would do the dolphin kick, but most individuals were doing the flutter kick. I don't know per se that I preserved more energy, but to me it felt more streamlined and I felt like I was cutting that water a little more efficiently. And that's kind of what I say in the course. I'm like, yeah, pick your poison, but always trying to minimize drag, because even in the videos that we put up, you'll see the other candidates next to me with like the loosey-goosey like spaghetti arms on the side. I don't know, they seem pretty calm, but I was always doing like kind of the razor blade cut as I was doing my underwaters, especially with fins.
Yeah, it's pretty legit. I never crossed my arms or like tried to stay streamlined, and it hurt a lot. So you always had good underwaters, so that's nice.
Yeah, because one of the things I guess it does when you have your loosey-goosey arms is your shoulders are really a whole other wall, right, that you're pushing.
Yeah.
So I would assume it is a more efficient manner to do the arms cross. What are your thoughts, though, Doctor, as far as doing like the flutter kick versus the dolphin kick when you're finning?
So I've found, for long distance, generally, the flutter is going to be a lot more sustainable. Ultimately, I do think it depends on like what you're good at. So, all things being equal, if you're proficient at both, the dolphin's probably going to be faster, and the flutter is going to be more sustainable. But that said, if you're going to school in 2 weeks and you just can't do the dolphin, you're better off probably just sticking with the flutter than trying to do dolphin just because someone told you dolphin is better.
Totally.
Right. Yeah.
The dolphin might be good for someone with a really good like big swimming background, because I know they teach that for like collegiate and high school swimmers kicking off the wall and freestyle strokes and stuff like that. So just depends on your background, I guess. I
was just stationed in Hawaii before, and I was doing a lot of hula dancing, so I think my hips were loose.
Hula.
I just felt like ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's. Well, I do want to break down a little more technique. So you talked about the what do we call it? The start. What's the word you're using?
Push off.
Yeah, your
push off, breakout. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit more when you're in the middle section of your underwater. What are some tips and tricks to keep in mind at that point?
Yeah, so part of it is mental too. So I like to compartmentalize or compress the activity. So like if you look at just a single 25 meter underwater, it's like when you push off, that's basically free money. It's not hard. It's like anyone can do it, but that's going to get you, say, a fifth or fourth of the way across the pool, whatever. You're going to get some distance the way across the pool with basically zero effort. And then the last little bit, it's like, okay, anyone can make it an extra five yards or so. So when you add those two together, then you just have really that middle piece that you have to really focus and bear down on. So I do think one of the most important things, number one, is just having the awareness that the tendency is going to be, you feel great in the first half and fresh, and you're holding those nice glides, and then in the second half you start to get a little squirrely, a little spicy, and then start cutting off the glides and wanting to get to the wall sooner, but you, in pursuit of that immediate gratification, you pay the price of the spiked heart rate. So part of it is just the mental side of this, saying, hey, just try to make my second half as good as my first half. It's it's something that technically you've proven that you can already do. It's not that we're not asking to make any stroke, any superhuman stroke. It's just make the same stroke that on strokes 3 and 4 and 5 that you made on strokes 1 and 2. So it's going to be different for everyone in terms of what works for them. Some people like to just kind of tune out and go to their happy place. In the psychological literature, they call it disassociation, or the opposite being association, where you immerse yourself even more into the task. So for me, I like to just really focus, just do kind of an internal checklist on stuff. Like, so for me, it's what I always find is helpful is focusing on the head, because we all want to take a peek and see where that wall is. But it's so amazing when you get your alignment down perfectly. You'll notice like, oh, I got like a half stroke. I got a half stroke closer, a half stroke less for that length when I was just perfect with my alignment. And you can just feel the water, how much smoother the water flows over the back of your head, as opposed to when you have your head up just a little bit and it's crashing into you. So, I mean, the simplest answer for the middle of the length is assuming you've made a good stroke and you're confident and capable to get more than halfway across the pool in let's say a couple strokes, maybe 3 strokes, which is still fairly acceptable. You've shown you have a capable stroke for that. Then just keep doing what you're already doing, and whether it's taking yourself out of the situation to just go on autopilot, or whether it's channeling your energy into something that's more productive, whether it's something technical. Whether it's the situational awareness of just looking around, and maybe it's a harassment situation, you're trying to see where the instructors are, just whatever it is, just something that takes your mind to a productive place, and just do what was already working for you.
Totally.
I loved you just harp on so many things that I've preached so much about, and yeah, keeping the head down is something you keep reiterating, and I've repeated so much. Sometimes people actually take it to heart too much, and they put their head too far down, and they're almost like looking at their toes. Now they're creating reverse drag. So keeping it in line is so crucial, but it's almost a beautiful metaphor of life is you'll get to your goal. Just keep on trucking, right? Don't look at the finish line, just keep on trucking. And then you'll get there and you'll be surprised at how quickly you did. But the second you start to peak and you want to know when you're going to get there, that's when things get hard. You're like, oh my God, it's never, in my opinion, it's very rarely closer than you think. Every time you look up, you're like, oh my God, it's still so far. Why did I look? I should have never looked. And you always regret looking. You're like, I shouldn't have looked, versus just keeping it down and just keep on kicking, and you'll get there when you get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you do look, you've created a vicious cycle. Then it's going to take even longer.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
if
right.
you hadn't looked.
Yeah.
And then going back to stroke efficiency, what would be like the max, I guess, strokes per 25 meters that you'd recommend someone? I know, because a lot of times like we'll get candidates who are just like doing like 10 strokes per 25 meter. What would be kind of like a good baseline strokes per 25 meter or pulls, I guess?
Yes, 7 is kind of the max. I mean, I think most people, if you're who were successful, or at least in the 5 range, plus or minus, of course, relative to body, your height and stroke proficiency, and just kind of the comfort in the happy medium of how much you glide versus how much you pull. But if you're under 7, you're doing all right.
Right on.
I'm assuming that changes a little bit with gear and clothes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. What would be the estimate for clothed?
Yeah, so for with full OCPs, the uniform, usually it's about double
wow.
your slick number. So if you're normally taking 4 or 5, then 8 to 10.
What kind of tips do you give as far as that goes, and keeping streamlined? Because I know it's hard even to point the boots if you're doing that. I'm talking like sometimes I think you do these like boot swims underwater. Those are terrible. What do you recommend as far as stuff like that goes?
Yeah, I think every little bit counts. Like, there's still a glide. I think the biggest mistake people make is completely cutting out the glide, because you feel like you're just going absolutely nowhere, and you really aren't going very far. But when you take, you've got those 8, 10, maybe even 12 strokes, if you can get, say, 6 or 8 inches extra glide, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you add that up over 8 to 10 strokes, that's, that can take off, one full stroke almost. And that might not seem like a lot, but I guarantee you get to a point in the set where it's like, man, I wish I didn't have to take this one last stroke. I wish I was one stroke closer to the wall. You wish you had that one in the bank. So it's really just try to do the same that you would do with, regular underwaters. It's all the same stuff. And then of course you're not going to go as far. I will say that it does require some more just pure strength of, with, regular swimming, regular underwaters, it's predominantly skill and not so much pure strength. Whereas once you start putting the gear on, there is a bit of pure strength involved. And I say that mainly from working with some females who have been trying to get into the special warfare community, where it's like they're really solid with underwaters, slick, and can do just as good, if not better, than a lot of the guys. But because of just not having that same upper body strength, and it applies to males as well. But there is a bit more brute strength involved with it. But overall, it is a lot of just staying calm and doing what you already do well with slick underwaters. And also recognizing too, like big picture, like the training plan, like they build in more rest. You're not going to be doing underwaters in full gear on 130s, a minute 30 seconds, just like you would. Like you will get more rest, I promise. And that's just having that in mind too. Comes into play. And then also this is where any freestyle inefficiencies will come in, because a lot of people do find that the underwater, like once you get into the rhythm, the underwater piece of doing the full gear underwaters is manageable, but you really get your heart rate up when you're swimming back to the start with the gear, because you're not only overcoming the drag of that the uniform is providing against you going through the water, but just the drag of lifting your arm up and pulling and everything. So with that piece, making sure that if your hips tend to drop when you're doing regular freestyle, yet you have no chance with the gear on, because they're going to drop. And if they can't drop much further, and you're swimming through like it's some starfish, or not starfish, like some seahorse, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, Cody and I talked about it in that new program there. I mean, that's why we came out with that perfect form program, is to minimize on how much energy you got to put in, and how much mental and physical energy, just by focusing on the technique. And I mean, every sport really, it does come down to technique, regardless of how simple the sport seems. But swimming and like these elite programs, if you don't have it down, it's just going to be so much harder. So, and then another thing I want to talk about, you were talking about disassociation, because I do want to get into the mental game. I've spent, I think the longest chapter in that Hold Your Breath course is, I called it Find Your Happy Place, which is kind of what you were saying, right? And I talk about just all these different techniques and mental tricks and tips that I would personally use, and I know other individuals would use, to go to a different place. Some of the examples is playing a song. For me, I always had the same song in my head. Actually, by the end, it was driving me bananas. And then another one was like, just admiring the beauty within that's all around you in the underwater world, really focusing your eye on the beautiful tile or whatnot, the cracks, the little micro details. Another tip was looking at your teammates and know that they're in struggle too, and that they haven't quit on you, so you shouldn't be quitting on them as well. Those are just some of the many examples of kind of that disassociation, not focusing on the fact that you're underwater and not breathing. What are some tricks, and how do you teach your students to defeat the mind?
Yeah, so I tend to be like a very analytical, very logical thinker. So I'll look at like some of the facts of the situation, and reminding myself, other people, it's like you're doing an underwater, you're not going to be under there for longer than 30 seconds at the absolute most. And even with gear on, no more than 40, 45 seconds. So it's really not that long of a time in and of itself. And even, once you get to that last little bit of the length, when you start to really, really feel it, you're only going to be suffering for, 10, 15 seconds. So reminding myself that it's really not that long. Another thing, when I was getting started, a big thing, and before I kind of had the library of experience to know exactly where my thresholds were, it was very helpful to always, just know if I was trying to go for a PR or something, having someone there too, just reminding myself that like, hey, you're safer. You're probably safer at the bottom of the pool than you are driving to the pool, statistically. Just knowing that, hey, I'm not going to die. I have a buddy spotting me. I have, if it's at the course, you have instructors all over you. So being able to let go of that piece, is certainly certainly helpful. Like when I was starting, it's like there was a big difference between even just something very small and routine, a big difference between if I was doing it myself versus if my buddy was there, because even if it wasn't that hard, just knowing that, hey, there's absolutely nothing bad that's going to come of this. I might feel uncomfortable, but there's really I'm not going to die at all. One little trick that I use for like a set of underwaters, if I'm doing, say 10, I might just, if I want to do 10, I'll say, you know what, I'm just going to do 8, and you can quit after 8. Give myself the permission to quit after 8. But I get to 8, and it's like, oh, well, I just got 2 more. So instead of thinking, oh, I got 10 to do, I just think, we're only going to do 8 today. And then I get to 8, and I know I'm just gonna drive on, unless it's like a really bad day and just starting to feel really bad. But then kind of we talked about with the underwater itself. I personally like to focus on some technique element, whether it's the head position, whether it's trying to just get that extra little bit more out of the grip on the water, that resistance and that pull, maybe holding the glide even just a little bit longer. Another thing that's I like too is say, okay, I don't care what happens in the second half of the length. All I care about is I'm going to try to go as absolutely far as I can possibly go for 2 strokes. And then after that, it's like, hey, do what you want. But usually it's like, oh, okay, I'm already almost there. So I'm not going to say, okay, well, I'm not going to say, okay, screw technique and let's just power through it at that point. It's like, oh, because I really focused on these first two strokes and made them perfect. I got a little further than I would normally get, and like, oh, I'm doing well. And then and I only have maybe a stroke and a half left to go. So just compressing the task in that way too. It's cliche to say, just focus on the moment, but some of that is very true too. The only thing you can control is that single stroke that you're taking at that moment. And if you're worrying about what's going to happen, and this applies to life in general as well, it's like if you're worrying about the future, you're worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet. You don't know what's going to happen the end of the length. You could, the instructor might come down and say, hey, you know what, you did a great job on that half of the length. Come on off, have a break. Take a break on the side of the pool. You don't know what's going to happen. So the only thing you can control is what's happening at that moment. And which kind of reminds me, like a friend of mine who went to CRO, so Combat Rescue Officer Selection. They had a pool session where they said they put one of the boats, the IVUs, out in the middle of the pool, and they said, I want someone to go 3 times around the pool with no breath, and if someone steps up and does it, then we'll end the pool session. And then no one was going to do it. Then finally one prior PJ stepped up to raise his hand. And then everyone was like nervous, like, oh, is he going to die? Is he going to pass out? And they said, okay, just go 3 times around the circle, around the boat in the middle, and you're good. And then they did it. It's like, oh, and the point of it being that, hey, guys, we don't know what we were going to ask. We just want to see who's going to step up and take the challenge. And so you literally never know what's going to happen, good or bad. And if it's and you can't control anything that's happening in the future. You can just set yourself up for success for what's going on in the future. And you certainly don't want to take away the quality of that current stroke by worrying about something else. And that's basically the manifestation, like we talked about earlier, of, oh, I'm getting a little squirrely. I'm going to peak at the far end of the pool, or I'm going to quick stroke one and waste some energy and make myself less successful going forward. So those are some of the things that I kind of think about.
Let's talk about shallow water blackout, because it's important. Yeah. And we should have probably actually had a full disclosure at the start. You should only be doing underwaters with a trained professional, or hopefully a lifeguard, or at least a buddy. Let's talk about shallow water blackout. Do you ever experience it? Have you ever had students blackout? What can you teach us about it?
Yeah, number one is it's a real deal. It's nothing to be nothing to minimize. minimize it all. And even if you're working within yourself, the fact is, if you were to have some, you can be working within yourself. You can be on the first length of doing something, 2 strokes into it, and have a cardiac event. And, it's not that you were doing anything dumb. It's just you're in a situation where you can't really recover yourself, being subsurface. So I think it's some of it goes to training philosophy too, of in having done this myself for a while. Like, I know kind of numerically where my limits are. I know that if I'm doing underwaters on one whatever, that okay, this is well within myself. And if I'm going to be fairly certain that I'm really comfortable or proficient at that before I move on. There's certain things I won't do on my own. Like, I won't do 10-ups on my own, just because it's like we talked about, there's no break in it, and you get your heart rate up no matter how strong, no matter how fit you are, no matter how good your technique is, your heart rate's going to spike during that activity. So I won't do that. I won't do stuff deep at the bottom of the pool for, like, I won't do, say, like ditch and don at the bottom of a 15-foot pool alone. So I think being in relatively shallower water can kind of mitigate your risk to an extent. But yeah, it's whenever possible, be with a buddy, be with an instructor. I definitely wouldn't swim in the pool without a lifeguard at all. It's simply for the reason, water confidence aside, just if you were to have some kind of cardiac event or asthma attack or something, and your subsurface, you're not in a position where you can recover yourself. And then those are really the main things. Don't be a hero in training. Save. And it goes to the philosophy too of the goal of training in a preparatory phase. Obviously, it's a whole different animal when you get to a school, but in the preparatory phase, the goal isn't really to improve your suffering tolerance. The goal is to really expand your comfort level. It's like, if can I do intervals on or underwaters on 130? It's not just about, okay, can I now just suck it up and can I do it on 120? It's how easy can I make these 130s, and kind of staying within that comfortably hard range, when you're training on your own for the most of the time, or even with a buddy, working at a level that is challenging, and you kind of feel like, okay, this kind of sucks and I wish I wasn't here right now, but not so much that like you see the world closing in and whatever. So really just being smart about it is really, really the big thing.
Yeah. Also, avoiding the hyperventilating is definitely crucial to not blacking out. And I won't break down the science of CO2 and all that right now, but yeah, that's usually what it is. And one thing I wanted to share, though, that I did recently, and it blew my mind, and I want to share that with both of you guys right now. You guys ever heard of holotropic breathwork?
No.
Oh man, this is if you guys want like to have a trip, if you will, organically with your body, that's the way to do it. And I had the privilege of doing it recently in a yoga type of event, and it was facilitated. You typically do want a facilitator, but I would strongly recommend looking it up. Holotropic breathwork. What you're doing is you're taking these fairly, at least the way we did it, I think there's multiple techniques to approach it, but the way we were doing it was taking a big-ish inhale and then a immediate exhale, and we're just repeating the process, but there's no pause in between the inhale and the exhale. And in a sense, you're hyperventilating. You're not doing it like very quickly. You're not like, but you're doing it in a very methodical, progressive, or not even progressive, it's just constant basis. And usually you'll do this for about up to an hour, half of which is you're doing that breathing, and then you usually come to a calm state. But it brings your mind, they actually warn you, that's why a facilitator is important, is you might go to these very potential dark places, and it brings your body and your thoughts to very unique places. Your body starts to get almost crepitous because you're depleting yourself of the O2. Everything starts to curl. And yeah, I was so close to going in, I'd say, a beautifully dark place to, reconnect with some of the sources of your pains. And unfortunately, I got like out of it because I was there on a professional basis. I was actually doing some film work. But if I had the opportunity of doing the full thing, I think I would have really gone into a unique place. And it's something that I know a lot of military individuals wouldn't know about, because it was, it's a very grounded Zen type of community that we don't necessarily interact with. But holotropic breathwork, mind blowing. It was so exciting. Yeah, check it out.
What's
totally
your
natural.
What's the big takeaway?
Big takeaway is I would look into it, do your research, and it's a great. I think it's potentially a great like therapeutic mental process to do, that's just natural, using your own body. So yeah, like, I mean, I was like, these hallucinogens are getting legal. It's still not going to be the case for like military individuals, but this is in a sense a way of getting a different perspective, just using your own breath, which I thought was very unique. And especially somebody with like a breathing and a like free diving background such as myself, to just get that revealed to me. I was like, what? You can do this? This is a thing? Like, I didn't know that was a thing, And actually, part of me, for me, it was really weird. I think you get to see the tightnesses in different parts of your body. And for me, the throat closed up, and then my lips started getting super tight, and my whole face was scrunching. Because again, it's just like wherever you're keeping the tightness. And the facilitator came up and he's like, hold your breath. And I didn't even think of like, oh, here we go. But I was like, he's like, hold your breath until you feel like you want to take your next breath. So I did, and I think it turned into like a 3.5 minute breath hold, because apparently they were like, the facilitators were talking, they're like, what's going on? Like, it's been like, why isn't he breathing? And I was just in a total present, grounded state. It was weird because I was in that tight, dark place, and then the breath hold took me out of it and really put me into that flow state. And it wasn't like trying to impress anybody or doing anything with the breath hold. I just felt totally present. And of course, it's just easier to hold your breath when the whole CO2 is purged at this point.
Yeah,
so you have
just
no
disclaimer,
urge to breathe.
Don't do that. Don't do this for underwaters.
Exactly. Do the exact
Disclaimer.
opposite. Do the exact opposite. But it felt very cool to do just out, and it wasn't in the water. It was just on the grass. It was a really beautiful thing. And then when I finally took my breath, I was like so zen and calm. So again, holotropic breathwork, do your Google search, and it's pretty intense. I wouldn't just recommend doing it on your own, but it's really cool.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool stuff. I'll have to look into that. Holotropic breath holding.
Yeah.
Let's get into another drill that we get tons of questions about, and I'm sure you do too, is the egg beater. Egg beater, I guess, kick. I was always really bad at it I'm like famously bad at it going through swimmer school. I pretty much couldn't do it. So I was just flutter kicking all the time. And now I can kind of do it. So what would you recommend? I guess maybe like top 3 tips for a solid egg beater, if it was like a clickbaity title.
So number one, make sure you have the hip mobility to be able to do it. It's amazing when you teach people how much quicker people who have the mobility are able to pick it up versus the people who don't. So if you don't have the mobility, it's just like almost impossible to get into the positions to do it. Number 2 is just understand what it actually is. The egg beater, you're trying to essentially create circles or rotation with your foot beneath you to create this sort of microcurrent to help buttress you upward toward the surface. And it's not so much of a pistoning up and down. You're really trying to create circles with your feet. And then you watch videos, and it's not 100% literally circles, but if you think of that concept and you feel more circular than rotary, you're going to be more successful. And then if you are struggling with it, breaking it down and doing your wall drills, that's where you can get some of that functional mobility too. So it's one thing to stretch your hips out and get them more flexible, but it's also then you have to transfer it into the actual task. So doing the work at the wall that allows you to really get comfortable with getting those hips and knees wide and keeping the knees up instead of letting them drop. If you were to really simplify it as much as possible, it's knees wide and high and just keep them there. And then, that's probably the simplest, clickbaitiest way to think of it. But and also just recognizing that because it's such an unnatural movement to anything that we do in life. It's not like with running. Like if you want to get better at running, like if you're walking, you're at least having some base for that. Whereas no one walks around doing anything that remotely resembles the egg beater. So it's, you need to put in the time, and it's at least a 5-6 day a week thing when you're starting, and recognizing too, progress is not at all linear. It's not like, okay, one day, 1 week I'll take 5 seconds off my interval times, and next week I take another 5 seconds off. It's like you could go weeks and feel like you absolutely suck and get nowhere. But if you stick with it and do the 5-6 days a week of focused training, then one day you'll show up and be like, oh, wait, this was hard. Why was this hard at one point?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, what about the flexibility between that you require when you're doing the frog kick? Because personally, even the breaststroke kick, right, which is the same as the frog kick when you're underwater, I have the difficulty of the knee flexibility and opening up like that. Any recommendations for that? Like, would you just say for some people, screw it, just quit and just do scissor kick, or if you should keep working at the frog kick?
It's always, depending on how much time you have. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly worthwhile to try to improve it. You can. There are ways with the kick, like if you were to put your thighs more into abduction, which is spreading them apart more. That can help kind of cheat the process a little bit. So if you don't get enough motion from the rotational part of your hips and knees, you just borrow some from another plane of movement. Is one way you can do it. And just another thing, sometimes you might actually have mobility. It might just be a coordination issue. So sometimes almost like doing the opposite. So putting a pull buoy in between your thighs. And then really the only way you can go forward is to get some of that rotation. And, you might actually have enough rotation. It might not be a lot, so you can maximize the propulsive aspect, but it might be enough to competently do the motion. And also recognizing that the frog kick, it's really not so much of a propulsive element of the stroke. I mean, if you have a breaststroke background, sure, you might have some stronger legs, but really the main purpose is to help smooth the transitions between the different phases of the stroke. We're not really relying on it so much to propel us very far across the pool. So yeah, just some little ways to kind of work around it.
Sweet. Cody, should we do speed round now at the end? What the customers have wanted answered?
Oh yeah. Customer questions. Let's pull them up real quick.
Yeah. I don't know why I called them customers.
The customers.
RSM fans or
or just people training.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay, first question was, what's the best way to learn egg beater? So best way to learn it, I mean, your book, I read through your book when it first came out. You had a ton of good drills in there, land drills and water drills to learn it. So what would you say the best way to learn it would be? Just doing it 6 times a week?
Yeah, basically wherever you are in the process, if it's so foreign to you that you really struggle in the water, even doing a wall drill, then yeah, just practicing it on land. If you can't even do the motion on land, then maybe you need to spend more time with the flexibility aspect. But overall, I think the most bang for your buck is the wall drills, because you do get, you don't have to worry about propelling yourself, but you're also getting that practice and that feel in there. But also starting slow, so really feeling the motion with it. So it's kind of the opposite of doing the real egg beater in the water, where you want to be pretty quick. At the wall, really start slow and feel that hip articulating in there.
Yeah, cool. I'll just plug your book, Essentials of Military Water Confidence, on Amazon, because the book has everything you need for freaking egg beaters, which I read through it and started practicing all those drills.
I like this question. Any tips on preventing that oh crap feeling when CO2 builds up during WaterCon? I'm assuming that's like that CO2 buildup in your muscles and stuff.
it's going to be different for everyone. I think it really goes back to the discussion we had about the mental side about, whether it's, I like to think kind of logically and okay, I have, think numerically, it might be going to, that happy place, might be thinking a song. So it's really going to be different for everyone, but anything that gets your mind away from, oh crap.
Yeah.
And then also just, with training too, just to, the fitter you get, the more you're going to be able to put that, push that point further out.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the associative nature. Like teaching, we always teach dissociation, like Vince sings his songs. I would just like think about something else, but associating, just thinking about technique is pretty smart and something I don't think we really covered at all in the past. So thanks for bringing that up.
Another kind of interesting one, I guess, water in sinuses, how to prevent and or keep, I don't know. So basically like how to prevent getting that burning feeling in your sinuses.
I honestly don't have a great answer for that one. I think some of it is just kind of get used to it. Some of it might be technique too. If you're inefficient with your mask clearing, for instance, then you're going to have more of that sinus burn. I mean, that's where I tend to see it the most with people is with mask clearing, and it's usually with people who the technique isn't great, and maybe they're breaking the seal of the mask too much, and every time they blow out, there's more coming in just because the seal's broken so much. So sometimes it can be just purely a technical issue.
Is it accurate when I typically instruct to preserve all your air until the resurfacing phase?
Yeah, for like doing an underwaters, I personally don't see great value in kind of the gradual letting bubbles out. I fully agree.
I think most free divers as well. That's pretty much the norm until you're just in your resurfacing phase. Then you can exhale, and it'll just make you can take your immediate breath, as well as like that way you're prepared for that breath once you resurface. But yeah.
Okay. The other question, last one I had was just, I guess, say if you're a year out from going to whatever training you're going to, how many days a week would you recommend getting in the pool practicing water con? I know it varies, depending on your background, but what would you say? I know there's huge diminishing returns, if you're just going 7 days a week for 3 hours, what would you say would be a good balance?
Yeah, I think 4 to 6, obviously, pool access is a big issue. And then, like you alluded to, I think quality is more important. I think frequency is important though, too. I'd much rather see, someone, spending an hour and a half, like really focused quality practice than in there for 3 hours, just kind of doing whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's, 6, if all things being equal, let's say, quality practice, you have a good plan, 6 days a week would really be ideal. That said, it also depends what, kind of what pipeline you're going for, where your strengths and weaknesses are. I mean, also how much other training you have to do. We didn't really talk about that too. It's like, it's 6 days a week is great, but if you have your running and your cals and your rucking and basic strength work, if as a result of trying to fit all that in, you're sleeping like 4 hours a night, and then I'd probably cut back on the 6 days a week at the pool, but really as much as you can that fits into a well-designed schedule.
Very well.
Awesome. Yeah. Dr. Alan Phillips, anything else any last imparted wisdom that you can share with our viewers?
Yeah, I guess one other little nugget, when we were talking about like the hyperventilation and stuff. And one thing I see a lot with people is when we'll do, okay, let's show me an underwater, and they'll be at the wall and they'll take this big giant breath in and they'll go. And it's like, it's well within their capability to do a single underwater. And it's like, well, why do you take that big breath? And they're like, oh, I don't know, I feel like I need the air. And so I always tell people, try to make, and this goes for water confidence as a whole, is like try to make it as like routine as possible. And like really, it helps your whole mindset as well. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm doing an underwater. Okay, time to go. I go. I don't have to rely on kind of psyching myself up for just to do a regular underwater. Yeah, if you're going to do, say, a 50, or if you're doing some intense event where you're going to have prep time for it. Let's say you're doing the whole drown proofing sequence or whatever. Go ahead, get whatever you special prep you need. But I would get into the habit of just being as routine as you can when you go through everything. And that's just something that I try to do when I practice too. It's like, think of this, look like a professional, because some people ask is like, I can't worry about, or the lifeguards let me do underwaters or whatever. And it's like, if you do some stupid stuff and every time you come up to the surface, you're panting and gasping for air, then yeah, they're going to say, hey, cut it out. But if you look like a professional, the way you stage your gear, the way you walk around the deck, the way you carry yourself, the way you surface, proper ascents and look like a professional and act like a professional, you're just going to be better and more confident and more proficient at everything you do.
Classic, look strong, be strong. And typically you get left alone. If people are seeing that you're unfazed, then they're going to say or think, all right, well, this is a waste of my time. The second you give them an inch, they're like, oh, there's a pain point. Let's go play with it. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Allen.
Yeah, thank you.
Go follow Dr. Alan Phillips' Instagram page. Do you want to just say your Instagram? I guess, is it tag like Instagram hashtag? You're at?
Yeah, it's at ALPHILL 4305.
Okay.
That's my where most of my water stuff is, and then for my my physical therapy practice, it's at the Kettlebell Doc.
Perfect.
So you can find me in those two places.
Cool. Yeah, lots of great videos on there.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
All right. That was it for this episode of the Rescue Swimmer Mindset Podcast. That was Dr. Alan Phillips. Check out his links. We are, again, coming out with the Perfect Form Masterclass. Pre-orders are now. A significant discount. Check it out, Perfect Form Masterclass, which is on rescueswimmermindset.com. A lot of the stuff we talked about, as well as, what's cool with that program too is we've included a lot of the hold your breath content in there. So you get a little bit of bang for your buck, as well as to interact. You get to be taught by both Cody and I in our best proficiencies, which, you had the egg beater, you had the buddy towing, I was doing kind of more the freestyle breakdown, and it's good. It's good balance. Perfect Form Masterclass.
Good stuff, definitely. And let's just kind of stay tuned for more podcasts. We're kind of back from break, so we're going to be getting into it.
We got a good one coming up. We won't even disclose it because it's going to be awesome.
It will be
a historic podcast. Here we go.
All right.